I want to start with a little story because story's kind of what it's all about. And the story that I want to start with is something that happened to me several years ago in Belfast. I was talking to a group of children's workers, and one of the children's workers told me a story that has stuck with me ever since. She said that when she was a young person, growing up in a Christian family and babysitting for Christian families, one of the Christian families told her this. They said, "You can read a fun story to our children before you put them to bed, as long as you read them a Bible story first." Do you get that? You can read a fun story as long as you read them the Bible story first. And I thought as soon as she said it, and she felt the same way, why shouldn't the Bible story be the fun story? Why shouldn't the Bible story be the fun story? And it's true, up to that point, I had been trying to write Bible stories as the fun stories, but it inspired me to do that even more. Because I felt like, yes, why should we put fun books over here, and the Bible should somehow be a duty that we have to do, and we have to get out of the way before we can enjoy ourselves. And so what I'd like to do right now, and I think I'm going to scoot this over here, is start with a fun story. Now, you guys are going to have to help me with the fun story. Is that okay? Do you mind a little participation? Nobody will be invited to the front. You don't have to worry about that. But what I want you to do is I want you to pretend you've got a chicken by the neck, all right? Chicken by the neck, little head's up here, little body's down here. He's alive, all right? And what we're going to do is we're going to use him to pay our taxes to a tax collector called Zacchaeus, all right? So when I say Zacchaeus was a tax collector, we have to go, "Rock!" and just hand our chicken over to him, okay? So let's just try it together. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Rock! It's better when more people do it. Here we go. That's fantastic. Let's try it again. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Rock! But he was also a traitor. All right, because he collected taxes for the Romans, yeah? And they had oppressed the people of Israel, had conquered them. So, when I say he was a traitor, turn to your neighbor and whisper, "He works for the Romans." Let's try that. He works for the Romans. So put it together. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, a traitor. He works for the Romans, and he was also a cheat. Because if he could, through the use of his bully boys, he could get as much money out of you as possible, more than he had to give to the Romans. So, when I say he was a cheat, we're going to do what I did when I was a boy and my brothers cheated in games because I never cheated. We're going to call for help and we're going to go, "Mom!" All right? Okay, so let's try it together. "Mom!" So you put it together. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, a traitor. He works for the Romans. And a cheat. "Mom!" That's right, a tax collector. A traitor, he works for the Romans, and a cheat. "Mom!" And as a result, people did not like him very much. Now, the first church I did this for, everybody went, "Aw," which is very nice, and that's lovely and very Christian. But I want you to go, "Boo." Oh no, they liked him less than that. Oh no, they couldn't stand the sight of him. Now, one day, Jesus decided to visit Jericho, the place where Zacchaeus lived. And even though he was a tax collector, a traitor, he works for the Romans, and a cheat, Mom, Zacchaeus was more than a little interested in seeing Jesus. The only problem was, so was everybody else in town. And as I say, they couldn't stand the sight of him. Now, amongst those people, there was the town butcher, the town baker, and the town milkman, all right? So there was Sam who sold lamb, and we're going to go, "Bah, bah." Jake who baked cakes, and we're going to go, "Mmm." And Milton who sold Stilton, and we're going to go, "Stinky, stinky, lovely." Now, it was a great honor to have somebody important like Jesus come to your house. So everybody queued up in the street, ready to ask Jesus to come to their place. Zacchaeus, however, the tax collector, the traitor, he works for the Romans, and the cheat, Mom, simply wanted to see Jesus and not get beat up in the process. So he sneaked behind the crowd, no problem, as he was quite a small man. He climbed a sycamore tree at the end. The first branch apparently hung very low. And he hid there amongst the leaves while the branches poked him in the forehead, ow, ow, in the nose, wow, wow, and in the bottom, woo. Let's try that again. Forehead, ow, nose, wow, bottom, woo. Finally, Jesus arrived, a great fanfare and multiple dinner invitations. "Come eat at my house," said Sam who sold lamb. Bah. No, eat with me, said Jake, who baked cakes. I have an empty chair, said Milton, who sold Stilton. Stinky. In fact, he had several empty chairs, lots of empty rooms, and no neighbors either side. Anyway, Jesus declined all of their invitations and everyone else's too. I already know where I want to eat, he said. And he walked to the end of the queue and looked up into the tree. Zacchaeus clung there, trembling, while the branches poked him in the forehead. Ow! On the nose. Wow! And on the bottom. Woo! And finally Jesus spoke. Zacchaeus, he said, Zacchaeus, come down. I'm eating at your house today. The crowd was shocked. And they said, but he's a tax collector. Rock, a traitor. He works for the Romans and a cheat. Mom, Jesus didn't care. Zacchaeus came down. They went to Zacchaeus' house. They had tea together. And when the meal was finished, Zacchaeus came out and addressed the crowd. Well, he said, I know I've done some things that are wrong. I've been a tax collector, rock, a traitor. He works for the Romans, and a cheat. Mom, but Jesus has forgiven me. So now I'm going to do things differently. If I've cheated you, I'll pay you back 4 times what I took. And I'm going to give half of all my money to the poor. The people were amazed. And Jesus said, today salvation has come to this man, that is son of Abraham. And that's when everybody cheered. Even Sam, who sold lamb. Jake, who baked cakes. And Milton, who sold Stilton. Stinky. The end. Well done. Good job, everybody. Thank you for playing along. There are 3 things that I want to share with you today that I think we need to do when we pass God's story on to the next generation, because that's what I'm talking about. How to do it passionately, playfully, how to do it with fun to make the Bible story the fun story. And the first thing we need to do is to tell the story passionately. How many folks here are involved with Open the Book? There you go. We got a few of you. How many folks know nothing about Open the Book? Hands up if you don't know anything about Open the Book. Some of you know some things and others of you don't. Let me just say that these Open the Book guys, they go into schools once a week, once a fortnight, and they tell children Bible stories. And they tell them from Genesis right to the book of Acts, and they tell them in order so the kids know how everything fits together. And the thing they do is they tell them with passion. They tell them with passion. And I say to the Open the Book teams all the time, even when you're getting started, you don't feel too comfortable, you don't feel too confident. The reality is the kids will get your passion for the word and your passion for them. Open the Book started 17 years ago? 16, 17 years ago? Started as a project, a millennial project in Bedford. And today, Open the Book is part of the Bible Society. And they have trained almost 14,000 storytellers who are in 2,500 schools, telling God's story to over 600,000 children on a regular basis. And that wasn't because anybody had a great plan. It was because God took that passion and multiplied it around the country. The reality is that we need to tell God's story with passion, because the passion makes all of the difference. And the sad thing sometimes is that we forget that when we're telling a story, that we're telling it these days largely to people who don't know the story. I was a pastor of a church in Trowbridge, which is still where I live now, for 5 years. And when I was there, I was asked to go to a school, the Newtown School, which was near the church, to tell the children there why Christians do what they do, how we decide to behave. And so I said, well, Christians follow Jesus. Does anybody here know anything about Jesus? And nobody really did very much. But eventually a hand went up, and one child knew that Jesus healed people, and another child knew that Jesus fed people. So we talked about that. And then a boy right at the back, he put up his hand and he said, didn't Jesus die by getting squished under a big rock? I know. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. What do you do? So I said, well, no, not exactly. And I told him about the cross and what Christians believe. And I said, you might be getting it confused with what happened afterwards, because they put him in a tomb and they put a big rock in front of it. Oh, he said, okay. And then I said, 3 days later, that stone got rolled away and Jesus wasn't there anymore, because Jesus had come back to life. And I promise you, this is exactly what happened. That little boy looked me in the eye. His eyes grew wide, his jaw dropped open, and he went, wow! wow, really? And I was like, yeah, really. Now, do you see? That boy had never heard that story before. So he responded like anybody would who'd heard a story about a man coming back to life. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean. If we tell God's story like we've heard it a million times, like we've been there and done that, then that's how it's going to come across. But if we recognize the fact that, particularly in schools and particularly in our culture, we're talking to people who don't know the story, and we tell it passionately and with joy and with creativity, then that story will come to life for them. Because let's face it, guys, God reveals himself to us through story, doesn't he? Yeah, primarily. Pass my story on, that's what Psalm 78 says, and that's what we do. The open the book guys, and hopefully parents too. Which brings me to my second point. We need to tell the story playfully. I'd like you to go like this for a minute. We're going to hold our hands like this. We're going to pretend we're ghosts, and we're going to go boo. 1, 2, 3, boo. Then we're going to go phew. 1, 2, 3, phew. Then we're going to go canoe. 1, 2, 3, canoe. Then we're going to go you. 1, 2, 3, you. Then we're going to go 2. 1, 2, 3, 2. Then we're going to go shoe. Shoe. Then we're going to go oh poo. Then we're going to go woohoo. Then we're going to go it's true. Here we go. Peter and his friends were sailing one night. Peter and his friends were sailing one night. Peter and his friends were sailing one night when they thought they spotted a ghost. Boo. When they thought they spotted a ghost. Boo. When they thought they spotted a ghost. Boo. That ghost looks like Jesus, said Peter to his friends. That ghost looks like Jesus, said Peter to his friends. That ghost, Jesus, said Peter to his friends. And all of his friends were relieved. Phew. All of his friends were relieved. Phew. All of his friends were relieved. Phew. But if that's Jesus, said Peter, then he's walking on the water. If that's Jesus, said Peter, then he's walking on the water. If that's Jesus, said Peter, then he's walking on the water without the help of a canoe. Without the help of a canoe. Without the help of a canoe. If you're really Jesus, said Peter to the ghost man. If you're really Jesus, said Peter to the ghost man. If you're really Jesus, said Peter to the ghost man, then let me come walk with you. Then let me come walk with you. Then let me come walk with you. Step out of the boat, said Jesus to Peter. Step out of the boat, said Jesus to Peter. Step out of the boat, said Jesus to Peter. There's room out here for 2. There's room out here for 2. There's room out here for 2. So Peter stepped out and walked over to Jesus. Peter stepped out and walked over to Jesus. Peter stepped out and walked over to Jesus with nothing but sea under his shoe. With nothing but sea under his shoe. With nothing but sea under his shoe. Then Peter got scared. He stopped trusting Jesus. Peter got scared. He stopped trusting Jesus. Peter got scared. He stopped trusting Jesus, and he started to sink. Oh, poo. He started to sink. Oh, poo. He started to sink. Oh, poo. So Jesus helped Peter back into the boat. Jesus helped Peter back into the boat. Jesus helped Peter back into the boat, and all of his friends cheered, woohoo! All of his friends cheered, woohoo! All of his friends cheered, woohoo! You're somebody special, said Peter to Jesus. You're somebody special, said Peter to Jesus. You're somebody special, said Peter to Jesus. The Son of God, it's true. The Son of God, it's true. The Son of God, it's true. The end. Well done. So you see, the idea is to tell God's story playfully. Do you remember the old story, the old Aesop story about the wind and the sun having this big argument about who could get the man's overcoat off? Yeah? And the wind blew and blew and blew, and the man tugged that overcoat and hugged it and put it on tighter and tighter and tighter. And then the sun shone, and the man took the overcoat off. I think it's that way with telling God's story. I think that if we pound people with God's story, yeah, they wrap up tighter and tighter and tighter. But people are always open to truth when they're smiling. And that's what we do. We tell the story playfully because everyone wants to play. People are always more open to truth when they're smiling than when they're frowning. That's just the way that it works. And so when I go into schools or when I'm in churches or wherever I am, we'll just have fun with God's story and open everybody up with the joy of being in the midst of those stories. And then sometimes, there'll be a serious story there at the end, or sometimes you don't even need one. Sometimes God's truth and his reality just drops in because people are open, because they're smiling. I had the great privilege of meeting David Kossoff at Greenbelt before he died. And the great thing I loved about Kossoff's storytelling was was the lightness with which he held the Bible stories. I think this is true of Jewish storytellers, I really do. There's a kind of willingness to be winsome and to be joyful and to be playful and not squeeze the stories to death, but to let them come to life in your hands and rise out of your hands and land on the ears and the hearts of the people who receive them. We tell the story passionately because it's so important, but we tell it playfully because in the place of play, people are then open to receive God's truth and let it speak to them. And finally, I think we tell God's story in partnership. In partnership. Because here's the thing, you see. If you've got children or grandchildren, and you go along to church and you take your children along with you, there's only so much time in the course of a week that those children's workers in church are going to be able to pass God's story on to your kids. And it's a very short amount of time, tiny amount of time relative to the rest of the time that the children have. Which is why in Psalm 78, it actually talks about fathers, it talks about parents passing God's truth on to their children. Because obviously, parents have a lot more time with their children in their presence, both to demonstrate through the way they live what it means to be a Christian, and also to tell them the story. The problem, of course, is that there are a lot of parents, and I get this, who don't feel particularly confident about sharing God's story. They think, well, what if a question comes up and I don't know the answer to the question? What if this happens? What if that happens? And I get that. I understand that. And so I feel like churches and families need to work together in partnership to equip and empower and give parents the confidence to pass God's story on to their children. And as a writer and a reteller of a lot of Bible stories, I feel like that's kind of part of my role too. And that's the role of the publishers that are represented here around us today, to kind of facilitate that partnership by providing resources that really work for kids. And so I've tried over the last, I've been doing this for almost 30 years now, over the last 30 years to try and be as inventive as I can be about creating resources that will present the Bible to kids playfully. So, there are collections of Bible stories. Now, the story that the OTB guys use, the Open the Book guys use, the book they use is the Lion Storyteller Bible. But the newest one in the Storyteller series is the Lion Storyteller Book of Parables. And this is just Jesus' parables collected, all together and retold in a fun and interactive way. And there's suggestions in the back for how you can actually use the stories to present them to your kids as well. And as far as like teaching groups of kids or even having kids in your family, this is a great resource. But this isn't the only kind of resource that's available. And I think that's really important to understand. What we're trying to do, certainly as publishers and as writers today, is expand the kinds of resources that are available to bring the stories more meaningfully to your kids. And so for CWR, I've written a collection of picture books told from the point of view of children in the Bible stories, so that the child actually interacts with the child in the story and follows the story through the pages. Now, I understand, there's only one story here. And I know that a lot of parents kind of look at this and go, okay, that's one story for $4.99 and there's 23 stories for $9.99. If you take the oldie view of things, that's a much better deal. But a picture book does something different than a collection. Because a picture book uses the pictures and it uses that journey to pull the child through bit by bit by bit. And for a small child on your lap, it actually becomes something that's a little bit better as an experience because you've been able to take more time with the story and get closer to the characters. Both of these things work. They're just different ways of doing it. The other thing I've tried very hard to do is reach out to Key Stage 2 boys. Because you know what? There's just not a lot that's been written about the Bible for Key Stage 2 boys. Krish has very kindly talked about my Bible Baddies book, which he used with his kids. And it's one of my favorite books to this day because it was aimed at boys, because I'm a boy and I wanted to write stuff for boys. But I've carried on doing that because it seems to me that, if we're going to keep our kids in church, we need to get the gospel across to them in terms that they understand, in terms that they get. So I did this thing This is called Bob Hartman's Bumper Tales from the Bible, the unauthorized version, okay? And it's actually a compilation of 3 books I did about the unauthorized version. And all I did in these books was to take the Bible stories and tell them from a slightly different perspective. Mostly with humor, mostly in a slightly ridiculous way, but to stick to the facts of the Bible so the story got across, but the kids had fun reading them in a playful kind of way. I've done a couple of others in that regard as well, something called Best Mates, 3 of Jesus' less well-known disciples who are a bit goofy. And then something else called The Big Pig Stampede, which is 3 boys whose fathers are market traders and who follow Jesus around because it's a great money-making opportunity. And they get drawn into Jesus' circle as a result. And finally, this is the newest one. It's called the Play-Along Bible. Because I felt like, now that I've got grandkids, I felt like there needed to be a book to sit a child on your lap with and actually spend time with them that way. You know what I mean? Open it up, and there's an action at the end of each line, and a chance for the kids to really kind of enjoy the story, but in a very simple kind of way. Let me do one of them for you here. Here we go. It's a creation story, so you're going to have to play along with me. Pretend you're 2. It's that easy. Here we go. Well, anyway. In the very beginning, everything was completely dark. You couldn't see a thing. So put your hands over your eyes and shut them tight, really tight. Don't open them till I tell you, all right? Then God said light. Say light. And it wasn't dark anymore. It was bright. Open your eyes. God called the light day. Shout day. And the darkness night. Whisper night. And that was the first day. Shout hooray. Then God said waters. Make a wavy motion with your hands. Nice. He separated the waters below. Point down. From the sky above. Point up and draw the shape of a cloud with your fingers. And that was the second day. There you go. Shout hooray. Next, God said sea, and the waters gathered together. Pretend you're swimming. Do any stroke you like. Yeah? Don't copy your neighbor. There you go. Then he said earth, and between the seas rose the mountains. Make the shape of a mountain with your hands. Fantastic. So there were fields of grass. Yeah, wave your hands above your head. And there were deserts. Go, I'm thirsty. Then God said plants and trees and grass and weeds wiggled up out of the ground. Make your fingers wiggle. Wiggle your toes if you've taken your shoes off for some reason. All right? Then God said fruit and flowers sprouted from stems. Smell the flowers. Nice. And fruit grew from wavy branches. Bite the fruit. Somebody to eat a banana. There you go. And that was the third day. Shout hooray. Next, God said sun, and he gave a great big sunny smile. Give a smile. Then he said moon. Howl, moon, moon. And he finished by filling the night sky with a shower of shining stars. Sing, twinkle, twinkle, little star. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. How I wonder what you are. And that was the fourth day. Shout, hooray. Next, God said fish. Go on, make a fish face. Show your neighbor your fish face. Go on then, very nice. And there they were, loads of sea creatures splashing and swimming and doing whatever it is that octopuses do. Do what octopuses do. Okay. Then God said birds, and they appeared too, flapping, flap, and chirping, chirp, and squawking, squawk. And that was the fifth day. Shout, hooray, nice. Then God said animals, and there were wild animals, roar like a lion, and farm animals, moo like a cow, and creepy crawly animals do a little spider thing there. That's very nice. Then God said people, and he created a man. Say the name of a man you know. Fred, Harry, okay. And a woman. Say the name of a woman you know. Eve, all right. Made in God's image, a little like himself. Friends who could talk with him. Say, hello, God. And take care of his world. Make a big circle with your arms. There you go. And that was the sixth day. Shout hooray. Then God looked at everything he'd made. It's all good, he said. 1 thumb up. Really good, he said. 2 thumbs up. And so on the 7th day, God did what anyone would do after 6 good days of work. He rested. Pretend to go to sleep. Thank you. Make a little snoring sound. Very good. And that was the 7th day. Shout, hooray. The end. Good job, everybody. I got to tell you, and it's so good we got so many publishers here. We are trying our best. We really are. To create resources that equip parents and equip churches and give people the confidence to tell God's story in an interactive, exciting, fun, and playful way. And all we want to do is encourage you guys to have a go. Because when that happens, when we tell God's story, when it comes to life in the lives of the children that we tell the story to, something happens. See, I tell this to the Open the Book guys all the time. You see, we tend to think when we have to stand up at a family service or an assembly or a Sunday school thing, and we have to tell this story, that it's a frightening time. And potentially it is, because you don't know how the kids are going to react, and you don't know how things are going to go for you, and you got to remember the story or whatever happens. But I say, listen, forget that. Forget all of that. Those 5 or 10 minutes that you spend with your kids around God's word, whether they're on your lap, you and the word and the child and God all together there, that's not a time to be frightened of. That's holy ground. That's holy ground. Because there's just a chance that the God who reveals himself through story is going to reveal himself to someone before you because you took the time to tell his story. It's as significant and as powerful and as amazing and as beautiful and as wonderful as that. And that's why I want to finish with this story. It's going to seem a bit sad at first, because it is kind of a sad story. I wrote the first couple of lines after my dad passed away, and then took 7 years to write the rest of it. And it's not a very long book. I just couldn't find the words. But I wanted to write something that talked about, I guess, the hope, the hope we have in Jesus. And the hope for all those things that we do in his name. So this is called Tapestry, and this is how it goes. When Danny's granddad died, Danny cried. And Danny's gran cried too. A week later, when he went to visit her, she was sorting through his granddad's clothes. There was the old brown jumper Danny's granddad wore whenever they played football. There was the faded brown cap he wore the time he showed Danny how to hammer bits of wood into a birdhouse. And there were his big brown boots, laces adrift, that Danny had stepped into and stepped onto and skipped beside and scuffed. But the jumper was empty, and the cap and the brown boots too. And that made Danny sad. I really miss Granddad, said Danny. I miss him too, said Gran. But we'll see him again. Jesus promised. How? Asked Danny. Where? When? I'm going away for a while, she said. But when I come back, I'll show you. A week went by then too. It felt like forever to Danny. And when at last he went to visit his Gran again, the clothes were gone. Instead, draped over the table, there was a picture made of cloth. It's called a tapestry, Danny's Gran explained. I made it while I was away. I like it, said Danny. It's pretty. There on the tapestry was the back of a house that looked a lot like his Gran's, and a garden, and a shed, and lots of people. Look, said Danny, pointing. That's me, kicking the ball. It's all of us, his Gran smiled. Our whole family. And your Granddad, of course, building this birdhouse. I put some other people, too, like the postman and the lollipop lady and Mrs. Martin down at the sweet shop. Oh, and Jesus. I thought Jesus should be there, too. Didn't know what to make him look like, but I thought he'd be the one with the picnic basket. Danny ran his hand gently over the tapestry. It was made of all sorts of cloth, different shapes and shades and sizes. But what caught his attention were the trees. The leaves were shiny and new. But the trunks were woven out of old brown wool. That's Granddad's jumper, said Danny. He looked more closely. There on the roof of the shed were patches of his Granddad's faded brown cap. And there were bits of black shoelace tracing the shape of the clouds. You asked me when we'd see Granddad again, said Gran. I made the tapestry to help you understand. And as best as I can explain it, it's something like this. Your Granddad is with Jesus, Danny, waiting for us in a beautiful place. But one day, Danny, one day God is going to make this world of ours all over again. Just like he did for Jesus when he brought him back from the dead. He's going to use lots of shiny new things to make his new world, but I think he's going to use what's old and familiar as well. All that we have loved and cherished, the smell and the shape and the feel of it. I think he's going to weave the best bits of what we have done into his tapestry. The arms of the jumpers that held our children, the caps we wore, and the laces we tied when we took their hands and walked with them through the woods. You will see your Granddad again, Danny. He'll be old and new all at the same time, but you will know him. And you'll kick balls and build birdhouses and so much more. And we will all live in God's new world and sharing God's great picnic forever. And she took his hand and she cried. And Danny cried too. But it was a different kind of crying altogether. So tell the story. Oh, thank you. Thanks. So tell the story. Tell it passionately. Tell it playfully. Tell it in partnership with people to support you and encourage you. And know that when you tell God's story, you weave a tapestry with him. A tapestry that can last forever. Thanks, guys. Cheers.